Welcome to another episode of New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Barletic. Joining me, as always, is Angelo Giuliano. We have a lot to go over, a variety of stories. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this Friday evening. You have to really like or be interested in geopolitics to give up your Friday evening to do this. I want to thank Angelo for joining me on his Friday evening, which is he's in Hong Kong. I'm in Bangkok, so he's actually an hour ahead, so it's later there than here. How are you, Angelo?
Great, Brian, great. Always nice to be live on Friday to have this nice routine, just to catch up with what is going on. Exchange. What are the topics, Brian, for today?
So I've had people asking me throughout the week about these protests in Mongolia. So the short answer is we're really not sure. But what we'll do is we'll share what we do know so far, and maybe this will help people keep an eye open and maybe catch something that we're missing. Not many people are focused on Mongolia. You don't hear about it often. So maybe let's just take a look at this. This is from Voice of America. And what the point we're at right now is we're analyzing media, which is not the best way to do this. You have to follow the money. You have to find out who the people are leading it. There's always leaders, political parties, or organizations, or these NGOs, fake NGOs backed by the US, leading protests. Even if they're good protests, they will be led by political parties and institutions within that country. So this is Voice of America. If it's a protest the US doesn't like, usually Voice of America will smear it. And if it's a protest they're behind, or they think they could take advantage of, they will promote it. So this Voice of America article, I would say, is mostly favorable toward the protests. And we're supposed to believe that there's some coal deal, there's some missing coal. And here, maybe let's just read. I got a quote here. So it says, as winter bites, Europe is facing a gas shortage. A cold snap has coincided with lower volumes of gas exports from Russia, forcing a big spike in prices. Consumers and businesses across the continent are facing this is about power Siberia to pipeline. So I jumped the gun. It's about coal that went missing, apparently. And we're supposed to believe that students and others are coming out in sub-zero temperatures. They're coming out and they're going to protest because some coal went missing. They're also trying to connect it to higher living prices. Okay, maybe, but they're mainly focused on this corruption case. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it that people will just spontaneously come out because some coal went missing. Not coal that they were going to use anyway. This was coal that was being exported anyway. I don't buy it that they're coming out in sub-zero temperatures. Now, there's a couple of things I want to get into. Angela, what is your first take at face value?
What shocks me is the figure they're announcing. They're talking about $9 billion worth of coal that would have been shipped to China, and actually the oligarchy of Mongolia would have pocketed this money. But just to give you an idea, the GDP of Mongolia is $15 billion. So we are talking about more than half the GDP of Mongolia, which was stolen by the Mongolian oligarch. It's just the figure. The figure is staggering. I mean, I don't know how can you do that? I mean, I know only one person in the world that can do that. It's Zelensky. But seeing that this scale of theft, I'm just skeptical about this. I just saw they had three demands. I mean, that's one thing that I got just before the show is announcing the names of the suspects, 15 years of prison for them. Okay, publishing further information about public project during the COVID era. So those are the conditions, the requests they have, and there's a spokesperson for them, but we don't know who it is. And basically you have it seems like they're calling about the dissolution of the parliament. Those are the information that I have so far.
Okay, and so we know that people aren't spontaneously coming out for this purpose. This is some political party, some NGO or a group of NGOs is behind this. We don't know who. We don't know which side they're on. We don't know if it's purely an internal political affair of Mongolia or if there's foreign interference. I was talking about the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline because this is a new pipeline that Russia will be building. Guess where it's going? It's going through Mongolia. How about that? And so if it's not this protest, it'll be a protest in the future. The US is not going to allow this without a fight. They will do whatever they can to turn Mongolia upside down and inside out to stop this, just like they did to Germany regarding Nord Stream 2 before just plain outright blowing the pipelines up. Now, there were a couple of things that I caught. There's articles like this, and they will be naming people. Let's see if I can find the name. This is a very difficult name to pronounce. Right here, Oyungerel Tsedevdamba. And she's a former member of parliament and founder of the Civic Unity Party. So when this is how you do the research. You look through the Western media, try to find the name of anyone that they mention and start researching and see which side they're on. She seems to be an advisor to the current government, a non-cabinet advisor. But her background is very typical of a U.S. proxy. So this is her profile at Yale World Fellows Program. And they talk about all of these organizations that she's a part of. And she's co-founder and executive director of Liberty Center. And Liberty Center just jumps out at you. She's in Mongolia. Does this sound like something Mongolian people would come up with? I mean, it's in English, and it's called the Liberty Center. This screams National Endowment for Democracy. And sure enough, if you go use Wayback Machine and you go to libertycenter.org about us, you can see it's the same one. Liberty Center, it's Mongolian. And you go down to our sponsors. And right here is National Endowment for Democracy and also Soros Foundation. Let's see what else. Here's NED's official website. 30 years after Mongolia's democratic revolution, has democracy delivered for all? So the other thing you do is find Mongolians who are involved with the National Endowment for Democracy, find them on social media and see what they're saying about the protests. So that's what I did. I saw this. This is one of the, she's Dolgyan Aldar, and if I'm mispronouncing this, I apologize. She's an NED fellow, which means she has her own little web page on the NED's website. And I thought, well, let's see what she's talking about. So I go to her profile on Twitter, it's public profile, and scroll down, and it seems like she's promoting. She's promoting it, she's retweeting it. She seems to be very pleased with these protests. So this is our preliminary findings. This is hardly conclusive. A lot of people say, Brian, you'll just say any protest in the world is funded by the US government. No, I don't. And I'm proving that right now by saying this protest, I do not know. I have to find evidence. I have to figure out who are the leaders and the ones supporting it and where are they getting their money and their support from, political support, external, internal. There was a protest here in Thailand in 2013, 2014. It looked like a, by the book US color revolution, but it was actually a counter color revolution. It was interest in Thailand trying to oust the US client regime. Now, Angelo, can you think of a reason, and I'll just share my theory and then you tell me what you think. Maybe the government that's in power right now, they don't want to get it out. Maybe it's very pliable. From the West's perspective, maybe they just want to put pressure on them to pass some sort of legislation or create some ill will between Mongolia and China over this coal thing. And maybe that's why they're doing it, because I don't see any calls for regime change yet. So what do you think about this? Not everything the U.S. sponsors is necessarily aimed at outright regime change.
Well, when you look at who are the partners of Mongolia, it's mainly, especially when it comes to import, it comes from from Russia. When you're talking about like export, mainly coal, that's all China. Then you culturally, they're pretty much like either pro-China or pro-Russia. It's a landlocked country. They have they're probably lots of mixes, and they've been always friends. So there's this is one of the countries that will never shift pro-US. But what you can do the same as they did with Malaysia. You can actually try to destabilize. It's already you can achieve an objective of just destabilizing, not about having them. You'll never have NATO bases in Mongolia, that's for sure. But if you can destabilize, and again, you have this power Siberia too, which is essential. They are going to start the construction in 2024. It is 50 billion cubic meter. Just to give you an idea, the proportion of what Russia was sending to Europe was 150 billion cubic meter. So this would amount to a compensation of 1/3 of what Russia will lose by losing the business with Europe. So you see, it's essential for China, and also it's a way to get currencies. Lost business from Europe for Russia. So that is essential, and it's essential also for Mongolia. Just think about in terms of transit fees. Transit fees. I think Ukraine is getting $2 billion a year. Probably here there's a $1 billion for Mongolia. Keep in mind that $1 billion that's so much. For a country that has only a GDP of $15 billion. So I don't see. I think in the worst case, it's about creating chaos. And I think again, as you said just before, it's how those protests are probably not organized by NED or Western forces, but they can jump on them, hijack them, and amplify the message. I'll give you an example. You know what I did when I saw what happened in Peru? I look at the position of first the Western media, and then I came across one tweet by Francis Fukuyama. Francis Fukuyama, who's a NED fellow.
Yes.
He's the brain behind NED. And he was like so happy. He was saying, well, Castillo is a screaming corrupt, it's good, he's gone. He's been in power for a few months. How can he be corrupt? He didn't, even if he was corrupt, he didn't even have time to steal anything. He's been just elected, So just look at that. But I would say what NED would do in Mongolia, just amplify. This chaos, well, it's great. Let's put more chaos on top of it. Amplify the message.
Yes. And I just want to point out, Angelo, you're talking about how much 1 billion would be for a country like Mongolia. That is their population. I did not realize that the population was that small. I don't know if this is right or not, but that is a tiny amount of people. There's more people. There's many times more people here in Bangkok than in all of Mongolia. So those transit fees could transform the way people live there. Now, I'm highly suspicious of these protests. Again, I want to iterate. I do not know. So I'm not saying that this is an NED-funded protest. I just have my suspicions because we all heard of the Build Back Better world. Notice how you don't hear anything about that anymore. This was America's answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative. So, and I said at the time, you're not going to hear anything about this because this is a smokescreen for the U.S. just doubling down on interfering, disrupting, and destroying. They are not going to build anything. China builds, the U.S. destroys. And one of the partners for the Build Back Better world was an organization that builds absolutely nothing. And it's this one, Millennium Challenge Corporation. And this is one of their projects, and it's in Mongolia. And I talked about this at the time. Social inclusion in MCC's Mongolia Compact, affordable water for all in Ulaanbaatar. And when you think about affordable water for all, I think of a Chinese company coming in and building, like modern infrastructure, and that is what China does. What does the United States do? What is she doing? Does it look like she's building pipes or a treatment facility? No, she's got a little clipboard and she's knocking on doors, and this is all about an exercise on getting people in Mongolia through these U.S. government-funded fronts to all get behind calls to pressure the government, which is exactly what these protests are. That's why I'm highly suspicious that somehow the U.S. is behind this. Again, we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. And Angela, you got anything else you want to say about Mongolia?
It's interesting. They want to bring drinkable water in Mongolia, and in Flint, Michigan, they still, it's been a decade. They don't have drinkable water.
Well, maybe that's because America's idea of bringing drinking water to people's knocking on doors and getting to sign a petition instead of actually just building the infrastructure.
Exactly. I think. Yeah, but I see. You see, the tool they use. It's very often very different. Depends on the level of development the country has. I think in a country like Mongolia and poor countries, rural countries, they tend to use a lot more like U.S. aid. They're coming up. But when you look at the structure of the aid, the real aid, basic stuff, really important stuff is probably that 10%, but the rest is all conditional, and it's related to the meddling within the country, how you can meddle, and it's going to be directed, to whoever is going to do the work for you. Remember when we covered the Solomon Islands, it was not even the whole Solomon Island that USA was financing, but one island, so it could riots confront the other islands. That's how they do the divide and control.
Yes, and our problem with Mongolia is it's not my area of expertise. I don't think it's your area of expertise, Angelo. No. So we just these kind of things take time. We have to keep track of everything else that we're watching, and then we also have to start from scratch to figure out the entire political, social, economic lay of Mongolia, so that we can figure out who's doing what, who stands to benefit. So it takes time, and people are asking what's going on in Mongolia. This is as much as we've come up with so far. We'll keep an eye on this. Maybe we move on to the next topic. How about this? China's Xi gets a grand welcome to Saudi Arabia and promises a new era in Chinese-Arab relations. Angela, you've been following this. The Chinese president is in Saudi Arabia. The president of China has not been traveling around a lot over the last couple of years. So this is anywhere he goes now, it's a big deal because this is the first time he's traveling around. What do you make of this?
Well, just think about how, because Biden was in Saudi Arabia and he had very cold reception. It was an elbow sign. just like really extremely cold reception. Well, why was it like that? But because Biden called Mohammed bin Salman, he called him a pariah. We are going to make that a pariah state. That's an essential partner. How can you do that? So because of that, I think Saudi Arabia, they're looking at the US as being a very unstable partner. I'm not saying that they're shifting completely towards China, but it's looking like that. It's a potential partner that could join BRICS. And they've been talking in the last 2 to 3 years, they've been talking about challenging the petrodollar. So the petrodollar, it was actually, Saudi Arabia was a key partner for the US. In 1945, there was a Quincy Accord between Roosevelt and the king of Saudi Arabia back then. And they sealed the foundation of the petrodollar. What they did was Saudi Arabia promised to sell oil to the US and use only dollar. And in exchange, the US would offer protections to Saudi Arabia. That was the deal. And that was the foundation of the petrodollar. So now a lot of countries started to use, the dollar just to trade any commodities. But oil is the most traded commodity. So when you start using exclusively dollar for the oil, then you have other commodities that follow. Now they're talking about trading oil, selling oil to China in yuan, renminbi, the currency of China. And that's massive. We are talking about annually over $50 billion. So you see, there's a process. Russia already is not using dollar anymore. China has been starting to trade with many other countries like in yuan, and now you have this Saudi Arabia challenging the dollar hegemony. So I don't know what's going to happen with Saudi Arabia. You see, I mean, doing what they're doing, it's if it was, I mean, Libya, Gaddafi died for that, because of that.
Yes. Yes.
Iraq, Saddam Hussein died because of that. I wouldn't be surprised that you would have somehow something happening in the streets in Saudi Arabia for X reasons. You know, some protests, you don't know where they come from, but overnight some protests and some human rights abuses, and then you have all those NGOs, Amnesty International, just jumping in. You know, they were closing the eyes. You know, Saudi Arabia was okay. You know, was okay. We were closing an eye. You know, and now they are going to be more picky. You know, somehow they're going to change their attitude. Same as Qatar. You know, look at what, you know, Qatar. The stance on Qatar recently, they've been you know, bashing Qatar. You know, 6,500 workers, migrant workers that died in Qatar. You know that news? I just looked into this. It's all the migrant workers that died in a decade. Doesn't matter. You know, you could cross the street and they would count you inside this. You died of COVID. You are into the migrant workers in Qatar that died because of building up the World Cup. That's the stretch. And you know what? Nobody did the homework or really challenging that figure. So you see, I think it's also one thing which is really important. Look at the Western media. What is the stance? Are they shifting? Because this is an advanced indicator. If they start shifting, that means, well, you know, you are not in the good cards. You are going to get in trouble.
A lot of really good points. I want to also point out, look at what's happening to Europe. So everyone imagines that Europe and the US, they're great allies. I mean, they're the closest allies the US has are these European nations. But as this proxy war in Ukraine unfolds, someone has to pay the price for this. And it's not going to be the US. So the US has Europe paying the price. They put these sanctions on to try to pressure the Russian economy. Who is going to suffer most? Europe. They're suffering. I just read about a power outage in France. I don't know if it's related to, I don't know if it's technical issue or what, but that's already something people are worried about now, because the US is not friends with Europe, is not friends with Saudi Arabia. They are proxies. And when you are in trouble, you throw your proxy in front of you first. They are like a human shield, but this is on a national or even regional level. So as the US gets increasingly desperate and pushed into the corner, it's going to be asking its allies to suffer for them so that it doesn't affect them. They want to be the last one affected. So in the Middle East, who is suffering in the Middle East? All of America's allies in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, all of these countries that have been working together with the West and the US specifically, they're the ones being asked now to suffer on behalf of the US. That's what proxies are all about. You put these client regimes into power to serve you, not their people in their country, to serve Washington. And so Saudi Arabia is looking at this and they're thinking to themselves, if we continue doing this, we're going to end up like Europe. Our economy is going to be destroyed. We're going to end up in proxy wars. And we may not even end up existing as a nation down the road. So this is why I think they're looking to China. They're looking to Russia. They're trying to diversify. Angela, you're talking about human rights, which I think is very interesting. In this CNN article right on the screen here, it says, Xi's visit to Saudi Arabia comes amid frayed ties between the two countries and Washington, which harbors a number of grievances toward the two states over oil production, human rights, and other issues. So the U.S. doesn't like China and Saudi Arabia because they have a very bad human rights record. And while this is happening, this is what the U.S. is doing. U.S. court dismisses suit against Saudi prince in killing. And they're talking about this, well, I believe he's Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post journalist, and he was apparently murdered by the Saudi government in a Saudi embassy. And I think it was U.S. President Joe Biden, but even before him, they wanted to hold Saudi Arabia accountable for this, or use it as leverage, because already at that time, Saudi Arabia was starting to kind of creep out from under the shadow of U.S. hegemony. And now they just threw the charges away because they're trying to lure Saudi Arabia back. Angela, what do you think about that? They're crying about human rights, but then they're going to, they said they were so concerned about Jamal Khashoggi, and now they're just turning a blind eye openly, publicly doing it. What do you think? I mean, we know human rights is a smokescreen. U.S. doesn't care about it. It's the worst abuser on earth this century. What do you think about this?
Well, it's all about virtue signaling. It's just absurd. It's all those shows. It's it's all showmanship. It's just talk. But you can reverse. You not only you're selective on the human right. I mean, and first of all, you're not looking at the abuses of human rights you're having at home. I mean, the largest population, prison population, all the discrimination, basic human rights. I mean, again, we might not have the same definition. When you talk to Chinese, basic human right is how much you put on the table, food on the table, education, longevity. I mean, longevity, just that simple element. That China in the last year has just surpassed the US. China is supposed to be a developing country. It has just surpassed the US in longevity. Longevity, that is real human rights. If because you are in a country that is not taking care of its people, from within 2-3 years, your life expectancy is going to go down of 1 year. They're stealing 1 year of your life. That's really human rights. Then what for the US, what is human right? It's like this freedom of speech. But that freedom of speech is complaining about an existing problem. But you're not going to take care of that problem. In China, they anticipate. They are going to just look at what you need. What are your problems? I'm going to solve that. Having the right of expression to go out in the street and smash everything that, like they did in BLM riots. Was 6 months of riots. People died during those riots. People died. And you know what? What was the result? I'm asking, what was the result? What is it good for when you have that human right of protest and then the government doesn't listen and it's business as usual? While in China, they're looking at actual problems and, they anticipate, they do surveys and they deliver and it's tangible. That's the difference, You have a rational society, very scientific based in the East. It's not only China, it's in the East. In the West, it's driven emotionally, mainly emotionally, and it's not rational. And you look at even the politicians. China they're all engineers. In the US they're lawyers and they're bankers. I mean, lawyers and bankers don't produce anything, and it's a showmanship. Because they had to go through the election, that showmanship. They had to be able to tell the people what they want to hear, and there's no accountability. You see, so they're actors. So this is why you have a boxer who's mayor of Kiev. You have an actor, Zelensky. You have Macron. Who took acting classes. And just look.
Even Trump was doing. I always compare U.S. politics to professional wrestling, and Trump was literally involved in professional wrestling. And it's entertainment. And he was involved in it. He was involved in reality TV. So I think that really drives the point home, doesn't it?
Schwarzenegger too. I mean, Schwarzenegger. He's governor of the most powerful. I mean, California governor. They made him. What was his skills? In China, well, you have you have a system of selection. You have the background. And then do you deliver? If you deliver, you actually grow up. You you go up in the ladder of power. But it's not like somehow Zelensky came. He did he did this series of being the president. He played the president, and it was the cool guy. And he said everything that what the people wanted to hear. Once he got elected, completely shift, complete.
Yes. So you're bringing up a really good point, and I mean it really drives home how in the West they pretend that they exist for freedom, democracy, human rights, and in reality this is all a smokescreen. So with Jamal Khashoggi, it was always about using that as leverage against Saudi Arabia. They couldn't care less about this guy, what happened to him, who did what to him. It was all about having leverage over Saudi Arabia because the U.S. and Saudi Arabia really are not allies. This is how the U.S. does business with everyone. So even if the U.S. and your country seem to be on the same page today, the day you're not on the same page and you see how the U.S. does business with others who are not on the same page, they're going to do the same thing to you. Now it's Saudi Arabia's turn. There are things the U.S. is asking Saudi Arabia to do now because things are getting desperate for the U.S. They're losing their grip everywhere, in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, in Asia, and they're asking their proxies to take the hit for them. And Saudi Arabia is thinking that might not be such a good idea. Angelo, you talked about the largest prison population on earth is in the United States. Not like per 100,000. Total population is larger than any other country on earth, even China, which has 4 or 5 times the population of the U.S. And I think people have heard about this basketball player being swapped for Victor Bout between the U.S. and Russia. And I was listening to different U.S. politicians talking about how horrible the prison system is in Russia and calling it a penal colony. And, because they could get away with this, because Americans don't really seem to realize how bad things are actually in the U.S. They don't seem to realize they have the largest incarcerated population on earth, or that conditions in prisons are horrible. It's not a system of reform, and it is horrible. So maybe the system in Russia, I don't really know that much about it. It's not my business. I don't know if it's bad or not, but the system in the U.S. is horrible. Plus, it's the largest incarcerated population on earth. So where are these politicians? Where are they coming from? Where they see this as a something they could criticize Russia on? It's just more of the same, and they use each one of these incidents as leverage because they don't really care. They don't care about people being incarcerated. If they did, they would fix the problems at home in the U.S.
And it's a business too. Keep in mind that there's a large proportion of prisons in the U.S. that are private. It's a huge business. It's not only the prison, but everything that is around the prison. And it's very interesting when they actually pointing out the finger at China. They're saying, "Oh, you have slave labor." It's not. There's no slave labor in China, but in the U.S. you do have slave labor. How much? I don't know what's the daily wage, but we're talking about a few dollars a day, for prison population that is working, producing something in the prison. And again, it's the system in the U.S. It's as you say, it's not a system of reform. It's a system of punishment. It's a punishment
and exploitation.
Yeah,
because I mean, there's things that you could go to jail for in the U.S. that, I mean, could you really justify taking somebody's freedom away for some of the things people are rotting in jail for? I mean, you put people in jail for years for not paying their taxes, and you have a president or a government that is killing people all over the world. I mean, it is such a backwards system, and it's very hard to claim that you stand for principles or to convince other people to stand for principles in the West when that's what's going on. And I think that is something that accumulates over time. The impact of having no principles, standing for nothing, no consistency. I was listening to Alexander Mercouris. He was on a panel, and he was talking about how, and with Ray McGovern also, and they were talking about how the U.S. constantly lied to Russia to the point where Russia doesn't trust them anymore. China doesn't trust the U.S. anymore. And then is it any surprise that Saudi Arabia is looking for alternatives to the U.S.? I don't think that it is.
I have one point about the penal system in the US, just to compare, because I've been in China for such a long time. You see, I mean, it's very rare that in the US you see like white collar criminals going to prison. When is the last time you saw a politician in the US, core politician, going to prison? They don't. The system is protecting those politicians, and actually they even found a system that they rebranded corruption. They name it lobbying. In China they do the opposite. Because you are white collar, and you are actually politician, you are actually supposed to set an example. We give you so much power, but you know what? Not only you need to deliver, but if you actually steal, we are going to make you an example. So you know what they do? They do what they say. They call it, you kill the rooster to frighten the monkey.
Yeah.
So you kill those guys that are supposed to provide, work for you. You elected them. They're supposed to work for you, and if they steal, it's death penalty. That's how they do, death penalty. When is the last time? Really think about it. You have all those corrupt politicians in the US. It's a system. They become multimillionaire, and they don't work for people. They work for people, whoever finance them.
Absolutely, and that is a major difference. Even with Russia, one of the things Russian President Vladimir Putin did when he took over is he got all these oligarchs in the same room, live on television, and he was explaining to them that the free ride is over, the party is over. You're going to work for the nation, or you're going to leave the nation, or you're going to be imprisoned inside the nation, and that is how he sorted out the oligarchs, and that's how he got Russia back on track to being a nation rather than just being this I don't know, like a burning village being looted by Europe, the UK, and the United States. Now, this is a question regarding that prisoner swap. Didn't Russia get someone important for that basketball player? Victor Bout was accused of arms trafficking or dealing. I really never understood what I didn't look into that. I think he was actually arrested in Thailand, and at the time, the U.S. was putting a lot of pressure on Thailand, and they extradited him to the U.S. And then after that, as the years go by, the U.S.'s ability to coerce other nations diminishes. There was that incident where Thailand then did extradite the Uyghurs back to China, even though the U.S. told them you better not. And then the U.S. Through their proxies bombed Bangkok. So yes, it was a figure who was important for Russia. This basketball player is just a basketball player. The U.S. is pretending they cared about her, but we know the U.S. doesn't care about anyone, any American. The U.S. government doesn't care about any American. Look at the state the U.S. is in, and I saw Michael McFaul complaining about this, how it should have been one of the spies that Russia caught and has in jail. And he was talking about how this guy is such a great hero he served America, and all this lady did was play basketball. It really shows you how this country that claims everyone is equal and has equal worth really don't. It's your service to the system. And I responded to him he'll never see it because he says dumb things and thousands of people respond to him. But I just said, look, he's serving America, a country that is committing the absolute worst crimes against humanity this 21st century. So is that really noble? Are we supposed to be impressed by that? I mean, that is the reason I got out of the Marine Corps in the first place, because I came to that realization. So again, it is the bankruptcy of the U.S., the moral, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, he offers a bunch of ingredients that you need to get right for victory. One of them is moral leadership. The U.S. is bankrupt. Here's another question. Will China open soon, or is it still only domestically? Angela, you're in China, so maybe you can help answer this question. What's going on with the opening up? And by the way, this is an example of there were protests in China, but before that, there was dissatisfaction with the policies, and the Chinese government has actually listened to the people, unlike anything you will see in the West. Angelo, go ahead.
I would say I think the weakness of the government in China is communication. That is the biggest weakness here. And I would say they should have maybe opened up maybe a little bit earlier and gradually. Now what happened right now in China is that you have a lot of voices that in China that are saying, well, maybe we're doing this too fast. Keep in mind that not everybody was against COVID zero. A lot of people were kind of okay with that. So you had those frustrations, but who came into the streets? Actually, I mean,
Hardly anybody.
Hardly anybody. I mean, if you look at it's a continent, it's 1.4 billion people. How big is China? Lots of people in China didn't even know there were protests in the street. But, it's very easy to create the buzz. You need a few hundred. In Shanghai, you had maybe 200-300. And that's actually where they created the buzz. All the news came from Shanghai. But in reality, it was nothing. Actually, the biggest protests we had were more like the protests in Foxconn, at the factory making, Apple product. But that was not related to COVID. It was related to the fact that Foxconn had promised a certain amount. I think it was 15,000 RMB. And they changed that amount. It was 10,000 RMB. That was it was a social problem, between workers and the employers,
business practices, and it's a Taiwanese company too.
And it's a Taiwanese company too. Exactly.
The West was holding that up as, oh, look how horrible China is, but it's actually a company from Taiwan.
They made it and they made it a COVID issue. It was not a COVID really. Of course, it was the deal of the giving them money was related because of the lockdown. They needed some compensation, but then it was an issue between exploitation, purely exploitation of a company, Foxconn, which was unfair did unfair practices, and the Western media, they just used that news against the government.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying. Yeah. So
in Hong Kong, are the restrictions easing up there? I think it's region by region in China. What about
it's locally?
Outsiders?
So Hong Kong now you don't need to do quarantine. You need to do self monitoring. So you cannot go to public places for the first 3 to 5 days that you arrive in Hong Kong. Then when it comes to China, they are actually talking about maybe lifting the quarantine for people coming in and maybe and doing self monitoring. Maybe not. And if they even talk about doing quarantine not in a quarantine place but at home. There are changes, but it's going to be locally. It's not.
Yes.
Again, it's not centralized in Beijing. Yeah. Locally they have rooms. They can manage to locally too. But again, lots of rumors. Even the last rumor here in Hong Kong, they're gonna probably lift wearing the mask outside. Again, I think it's going to the right direction. Again, the West look at the virus very differently than Chinese. It's been, China's gone through SARS. People forget that. SARS was a nightmare for China, especially Hong Kong. The mortality rate was 11%. It was not spreading fast. It was hard to get SARS, but 11%. People got really scared. And the culture of wearing mask in Asia, it's not only China, but in Asia, people usually, when they get sick, they wear a mask to protect other people. You see, in the West, it's completely the opposite. You might think, I wear a mask because I want to protect myself because someone can give me, a virus. No, it's the opposite. Chinese, when you have even a cold, you wear a mask because you're supposed to think in terms of collective, not individual. You see, and this is why many things we try to judge when you look at Asia. Many things we don't realize that they're because it's a lot of people with limited resources. They need to compromise and not look at the individual, but look at the collective. Just in terms of resources, just to give you an example, if you take the resources in terms of food, what we call arable land, land that you can cultivate in, it would be the equivalent of the US having a population of 2 billion people. So imagine now, if you have 2 billion people in the US, do you think you can focus everything on the individual? No. You need to start thinking in terms of society. People have, and you lose something. The individual lose something, but it's the collective that wins.
Yeah.
That is it's resources, big population. When you are in a cram metro station, do you think you can just think about yourself? You need to think about everybody else. When you are in a city where you can walk, there's less people, much more resources. Well, then you can focus more on individual. Very different problematic.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really think about that. A lot of people that I've talked to who are kind of libertarian or anarchists, the ideal is very appealing, but in reality, it simply will not work because of the way human nature is. And that is something that is hardwired by evolution that you cannot change. When you have as many people as China has, you have to organize it. You can create chaos, death, and destruction if things run out of control. You can see how people on their own, like say you're talking about a crowded subway station. If there's a fire, people panic. So whoever designed the station has to keep that in mind and design for that, because there's no way that everyone is just going to be disciplined and in an organized way. They're all going to scream, run, and try to get out at the same time. That's why they design it like that. And that's, when you think about that as a microcosm, an example of how all of China maybe is sort of being run. And here's not really a related question, but kind of, how can Americans know that what is being said about China is not influenced by the same propaganda as we have been fed about Russia? Well, it is. And that's what Angelo and I have been doing all of this time. I have a lot of followers who follow my work because my coverage of the conflict in Ukraine, but then they say, Brian, you're completely wrong about China, because they believe propaganda produced by the exact same people lying to them about Russia and Ukraine. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to expose that and show people that, yes, the US is not just in this proxy war with Russia, but also with China. And they are obsessed equally with encircling, containing, dividing, and destroying both countries. And they're going to lie about both countries. And so I just hope people think about that the next time they see something that they want to believe because they have some personal reason they don't like China, despite not knowing anything really about China. They want to believe it, not that the person telling them has any credibility. Angelo?
Well, not only it lies to the rest of the world, but it lies to its own population. I mean, just think about, now we have the Twitter files, how much suppression of news, just think about, if the Hunter Biden, laptop information that was actually suppressed just before the election, 3 weeks before, if it had come out, if people had known about this, Biden would never have been elected. So you see, the problem is that they're not only lying; it's a system of just lying, of deceit. But not only to the West. The first victims. Keep in mind that when we talk about the U.S., we are talking about this kleptocracy, this system of the oligarch that are actually those special interests that are ruling the U.S. at the expenses of American people. I mean, you see, if there's one country that needs to recover its own democracy, is the U.S. Again, democracy means the rule of the people, power to the people, and the problem is that the rule of the game have been written by the elites. Why do you think right now you have a president elected, Castillo? He was elected in Peru, but he cannot do anything. He was elected, but he has limited power because he wanted to rewrite the rules. He said, I'm going to dissolve the Senate, and we are going to rewrite together, the people, a constitution. Well, of course, it's a big danger, because that's the foundation. If you want to really to make it democratic, you need to give to the people to get to write the rules of the game. Because you know what? We can play any game. Let me write the rule of the game. I'll win. I'll make sure I win. That is the foundation. So you see, the West talks all the time about democracy, but most people, they just don't get it. Democracy is power to the people. The people write the rule of the game, and number one, sovereignty. So one by one. You don't start with freedom of speech and so on. Then control of the media. You don't have like money meddling into politics. When you have money meddling into politics, then whoever is rich is going to control the game. So you see, there's all those preconditions. But first, the foundation is that piece of paper, which is the Constitution. And that's an old Constitution in the US. I mean, they haven't changed anything. It's been there forever. But it was written by the rich. It was written by the rich. Only a small elite could vote at the beginning. People forget. Slaves couldn't vote.
Yes.
Black couldn't vote.
Women couldn't vote.
Women too. So you see, I think we need to go back to the foundation. So the first victim, when I think it's really important. We are not anti-American. Again, we are anti this bourgeoisie, those elites. This deep state that actually is making the first of all American victims of that system. And then the rest of the world. And imagine what you're seeing in the US. Well, the globalist agenda is to replicate that and make it through the whole world, and we'll become just a consumer, because that's how they see us. If you want the best market for those elites, so those big corporations, is to make us more of consumers. So you're uniform, one thinking, uniform. And then it can really control us and sell us product, because that's how they see us, not human being. There won't be culture. We won't be like we won't have a roots. We won't. How the World Economic Forum says, they say you won't own anything. You. I mean,
be happy.
And you'd be happy.
You know what it is? It is modern day colonialism, and the West, the handful of special interests that for generations have colonized the rest of the world. They're also colonizing the West as well, and they use the exact same tricks: divide and conquer. Angela, what about this the attempted coup in Germany? Let me just. This is
yes.
Again, you have to get all the details. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew about it because there was some informant who was leading them along the entire time. And when, they're trying to link it to Russia, and there is no connection to Russia. And I mean, I think they've already admitted there's no actual connection to Russia. What they're trying to do, because they are in big trouble and they are going to have unrest because they have done this to themselves. They have cornered themselves economically, socially, politically, and they're deindustrializing, and this is going to create immense suffering across German society. And so they want people who start speaking up about it to be linked to whoever was behind this coup, which I don't think was a serious attempt. Angelo, what do you think?
I think they want to. I think it's a way just to better control the opposition. There's an opposition growing. The AfD, which is they call far right. And be careful. Whoever hear the media or the system calling either far right or far left, that means you are not following their agenda. So just be careful. It's not because they call it far right. Because they might be patriotic. Now the new definition of far right is patriotic. You care about your country, but shouldn't people actually care about their own country? A citizen should care about his country first. So AfD in Germany, which is labeled far right, they associated them to this coup, and it's actually mounting force. They used to be at 8%, now they are at 15%, and probably 20%. So they're becoming a very strong force. The AfD is the only party right now in Germany that is actually want to restore German sovereignty, because Germany's lost its sovereignty already after World War II, and it was even worse with the EU. Now everything that is decided for Germany is done in Brussels. So they wanted to restore sovereignty, and they actually were very strongly against the sanctions on Russia. So I think this is maybe Germany is going towards in the direction of social tensions, because people are going to really struggle, because of inflation. The purchasing power is going to go down. They will have problems to pay the heating bills, electricity bills. And I think, they're shutting down the opposition. That was the only opposition they had, because the rest, they all follow the globalist agenda. So AFD, and it's sad that I'm so sad that in Europe, the only rational parties, voices that are actually going against the globalist agenda are from what they call the far right, the far left. The left has been actually completely hijacked, by very early on. That was a strategy, because the anti-war movement traditionally came from the left.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but in the 60s, 70s, it was always the left. Now the left has been hijacked. Macron, he came from the socialist. He's a banker. He came from the socialist. I mean, he would be like far right, really economically. When we need to be really careful. And this fake left, really fake left. Well, whenever you have a leftist talking about identity politics, I mean, it's what we call a synthetic left. It's not the traditional communist. And it's very interesting. Those. I don't know if we talked about this, but when there was one of the first color revolution was May 68 in France, and they wanted to topple de Gaulle, because de Gaulle was challenging the dollar hegemony. He wanted to be paid in gold against dollars, because France had a trade surplus. So he was challenging all the time, and he didn't want to be aligned. He didn't want to go all the way with the US, and he didn't want he wanted to go with the USSR. But you know what? Who was backing de Gaulle, who was conservative? The communists, because the communists back then, they did understand what was behind that. And again, what happens is that you need, if people are pragmatic, they need to think first about sovereignty. So you can be enemy within a country, but first you need to care about your country. After, well, we deal within our home. You see what I mean? It's the same as you have a problem. If you have a problem in your family, Brian, let's say a wife, sometimes you have problems. Would you want to invite your neighbor to help you out in your own? That's how we need to look at it, So this is why anybody that is actually putting sovereignty after is betraying his own home, really. And the good thing is that, I mean, you and I, we have one thing in common. We're not ideology, we're not focusing on ideology. We just don't care. I don't care. If it's Lula or Bolsonaro elected in Brazil, I do not care. My question is it power to the people? Is it Brazilians that took the ultimate decisions, or was there any meddling? Because if you really respect democracy, you shouldn't go for your own ideology. You should respect. Saudi Arabia, it's not very modern. They have their value. I respect. It needs to be Saudi that rule their own country. Brian that deal with his own home. Angelo that deal with his own home. And we need to be consistent. And I see some people, I won't mention them, but they claim to be anti-imperialist, but then they're like, because he was not the good ideology, he was not socialist, or he was not, he's bad. No, you need to be consistent. Respect those people. They are more conservative. It's not the same. But if you're anti-imperialist, you should respect that country. Those people decide for their own future. Self-determination, foundation of democracy.
Yes, and we always talk about following money here. Western politics is completely controlled by unelected special interests, and it is all theater. And so people getting bent out of shape over fake left and fake right, empty suits, people who are in charge of absolutely nothing. People getting bent out of shape of which one of these sock puppets is going to be telling them the lies told to them by these unelected special interests. People need to think about, okay, I elect this guy, like say in the US, I elect this guy or from the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. What is their base of power? Where do they get their money, their power? What do they control? Nothing, because the corporations control everything. Here in Thailand, there is actually a political split, because you have an opposition backed by the US outside of the country. That's where their resources, their money, their power come from. And then you have interests here in Thailand that own land, businesses, industry, farming, and the people who all involved in that. You have to sort that out in the West. And if you find out that, well, both of these parties have no control over either one of these things, it's all controlled by corporations, then your elections mean nothing. It is pure theater. I think that's really important for people to understand. We forgot to cover this story, Angelo. Vietnam urged to get China-backed railway project on track, avoid missed opportunities despite concerns. Someone showed me this. I didn't have enough time to dig into this. Like, for instance, what is the actual project, and at the earliest, when could it begin being built? Have they already sorted things out? I think they have to a certain extent. But the one thing I did want to point out was that China has already been helping Vietnam out quite a bit in terms of infrastructure. China's focus on Southeast Asia, a new link to Vietnam. So this was China creating a railway from China all the way to Europe, and then creating a connection just for Vietnam so that they could export goods through this rail line. It's not a high-speed rail line, but it is a rail line that now Vietnam can also use, in addition to shipping goods by ship. They can also use this rail line. There was also this. No, where is it? This one, the metro system in what city is this in? The capital. They didn't have a metro system, a metro train in the city. China came in and helped them build it. And this is what China is doing all across Southeast Asia. That's what they're doing across Eurasia and beyond in Africa. They are trying to get things going in Latin America as well. And people seem to think, and to a certain degree, I guess this is true, that there are some tensions between Vietnam and China. But first and foremost, they put trade, economics, development first. They put that first. They do not let this get in the way. And I just want to show people this, because we always like to point this out. Trade, where did Vietnam export to in 2020? And China and Hong Kong, if you add that together, it's actually significant. And US, yes, is a large export market for Vietnam, also for Thailand, but number one is China. And then in terms of imports, it's more drastic in favor of China. So it's very important. Here's a good question. My view on China's presence in Cambodia. Cambodia was buried in bombs during the Vietnam War. There was a client regime that the U.S. was using to not only ravage Cambodia, but also menace its neighbors. And China is really the only prospect Cambodia has to achieve any sort of development, because the U.S. has been hovering over the region for decades and nothing has been done. As a matter of fact, there's been deliberate effort to impede progress and development. So we have to wait and see. Things are not ideal in Cambodia, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm seeing progress in Laos. I'm seeing progress here in Thailand. We have to wait and see. In Vietnam, we were just talking about it. Angela, what are your thoughts on Chinese developments in Southeast Asia and the Belt and Road Initiative in general?
It's all growing. I think it's important to look at the Belt and Road Initiative. What is the purpose? We had covered this before, but China has $1 trillion, close to $1 trillion of trade surplus. The trade surplus is basically China sells more than it buys. So that trade surplus is in a foreign currency, mainly in US dollar. what the US wanted for China was to reinvest that money into buying US debt. So it's like a Ponzi scheme. As long as you keep on buying the debt, you finance the standard of living of average American. But it's a Ponzi scheme. That debt is not meant to be repaid. It just grows and is not meant to be repaid. So what China is doing is investing through tangible assets in the Belt and Road Initiative rather than into the US economy. And by doing that, it achieved many purposes. It's a good way just to build roads, to your partners. So you basically is going to help their economy, and it's a good way to recycle your money. But it's going to give you access to the natural resources, because when you look at Africa, why are they building lines? It's because they have resources but they don't even have roads that leads you to the mine to get those resources. So it's helping those countries, and it's a way just to better integrate Southeast Asia, Eurasia and Africa, the global South, because when you have a road, the lead time is shorter. When you have a train, it's even shorter. When you have a high-speed train, even shorter. So when the world is closer, it's an integration. Slowly, you are going to trade more exchanges. Lead time, the cost of transportation is going to be lower. And you focus on trading. Rather than spending your money. I mean, that money that is going to the Belt and Road Initiative, that's what the US is spending pretty much every year in defense. I mean, they call it defense. It's not defense. It's
weapons.
Weapons, exactly.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And, it's not as if China is doing this out of charity, but they call it win-win. And it's a very straightforward proposition. It's called doing business. And it's something that people all over the world, in your own personal life, all the way up to national and the international level, people do. But the United States, and again, these are the special interests running, or I should say ruining the United States. I'm not talking about the American people. They're very hardworking. I'm an American. I like to think that I'm hardworking. But that they are doing business. And it's not hard to imagine that a whole country run by the type of leadership that runs China, as you say, Angelo, they have a practical background, engineering. They've gone from the grassroots all the way up to where they are. They are not, and not to diminish the occupation of lawyers and bankers, but these are not people who actually understand the way the world works technically. And even in American industry, a lot of these businesses are not being run, like say Lockheed Martin or Boeing, they're not being run as aerospace engineering companies. They're being run as, investments, as I don't know how to describe it, but they are obsessed with profit, and it just so happens to be aerospace that they're squeezing profits out of, and they actually don't really care about aerospace advancing the field. You could make money and still serve an actual purpose besides just making money. It is possible, and people do it all around the world, and it is a balance that you have to establish. It's like a farmer. If a farmer goes out and kills absolutely everything on one day, he's not going to have anything tomorrow. And that's how you have to think of a country. You cannot just exploit it to its fullest as fast as possible. You have to think rationally about, maybe you could just scoop everything up right now, but then what about tomorrow? And the United States, and even if you look at companies that do this, that, they have investors come in, they don't care anything at all about this company. They just want to squeeze every penny out of it, wring it dry, and then throw it away. And we've seen this happen over and over again. That's done to companies, and it's actually being done to entire countries, including countries in the West. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. We were talking about Mongolia and how they depend on Russia and China for trade. And they are right there surrounded by Russia and China, and they are landlocked. And you're explaining, Angelo, how irrational it would be for them to pivot away from Russia and China. It would make absolutely no sense. But that is what we see happening in Ukraine. They pivoted away from Russia. their economy collapsed, their society is divided, and the country is being destroyed. And we've seen this in many instances. So that's what we're talking about, even though it makes absolutely no sense. But that's why the U.S. invests in getting people into power who will do things irrationally to serve U.S. interests, to suit themselves at the expense of the country that they're supposedly leading. Angela, is there any other story you want to talk about, or any last closing thoughts? Maybe we'll do a couple of more questions, and then we'll.
Yeah, let's do a couple of questions. Let's see what we have. Someone mentioning Sepenza. Do you think his stories are fake? Of course.
They are. He's a verified buyer.
Oh my God.
I did one video on him and I said no more, because this is all he does. And then this will be a full-time occupation for me. He was talking about the movie Dune. It's a science fiction movie.
Easy.
And
It was easy.
He said he did a search on Chinese search engine looking for movie posters, and they photoshopped out anyone who was African American or Black, photoshopped them out of the movie poster. This was patently false. I did the exact same search, and the first movie poster that came up had not one but two Black actresses on the movie poster. Then I asked friends that I have who live in China to please just go. I know it's a weird request, but can you, when you're out today, just go to the theater in the mall and just take a picture of the movie poster. And it was one that had two Black actresses in the poster. So he lied about the search. Notice he never showed it during the video, and they have a very high production value, but they couldn't be bothered to actually do the search and show you, because they're lying. They're lying. And then they didn't ask anyone in China. They're experts on China, but they don't know anyone in China. I could take a picture for them to really prove how racist and horrible Chinese people are. No, they didn't do that. So lie on top of lie on top of lie. And that is every single video that they put out. So please, I mean, I have to question at this point, this juncture, end of 2022, if you come across this white racist idiot and you can't see him for what he is, I think it's quite hopeless. I think it's quite hopeless. By the way, this shirt is not a Freedom House shirt. This is Thai Move Institute. It is a Thai alternative media network here in Thailand. It's in Thai language, and they sell merchandise to fundraise. They don't have corporate sponsors or anything. And so I bought it to support them, because I think they do great work. And they've actually had me on a few times way back when things were quite hectic here in Thailand, dealing with US-backed protesters. Let's see if there's any other questions. Don't get Angela. You should have just pretended you didn't see that.
No, yeah, just for me, it's like a joke.
One last one. Will I ever debate? I challenged both of them, and because they're liars and cowards and just lowlives, they openly said they would not. And it was funny because Winston spent like an hour going back and forth with me in a YouTube comment section, debating me on why he would never debate me. It's just, this is the level we're dealing with here. So no, please don't mention them again, because I'll have no choice but to ignore you. But transparent.
Again, Brian, I have more problems on people lying about the facts than their opinions. I have no problem with opinions, really. Opinions, I'm extremely flexible. What I mind is people, just manufacture the facts. That's wrong. It's a intellectual insult. When it's opinion, then I'm fine. You can be whatever you want. You want to be Nazi? You believe you are pro Azov? I'm fine with that. But we need to clarify everything. You need to agree with me on everything which is factual. Then at the end of the day, if you agree with that, it's okay. But if you distort the facts, like what they're doing right now in Ukraine, they're actually saying, well, Galicia, this is no Nazi. They're actually manipulating. They rename things, and that's an insult. In terms of factual stuff. And that's what we try to do. It's really just giving the fact to people. At the end of the day, just you make up your own opinion. But all the facts. There's a research. You do most of the research, Brian. And it's an amazing job. But every time under the videos, every single videos of New Atlas, you have all the articles we talk about. And 95% of what we talk about, we're taking information that comes from Western media just because we want to highlight the contradiction. Because otherwise, if we take RT articles, Global Times from China, CGTN, you say, well, yeah, of course, you are the mouthpiece of Russia and China. No. We are actually exposing, because it's all there. The lies, because they change all the time, but the lies are all there. If people take the time, it's all there. There's lots of contradiction.
Well, it's funny because people call me a Russian propagandist, a Chinese propagandist, but what do I do? I mean, look at my sources are all Western sources. So what is Russian President Vladimir Putin paying me to do? Is he paying me to read the New York Times to people and just show them, hey, the New York Times or the Washington Post wrote long, detailed articles about how badly Russia is outfighting Ukrainian forces along the axis of their the main Ukrainian offensive toward Kherson City. That's all I'm doing. I'm just and I read from the Pentagon, the Department of Defense. I read their briefings, and I just point out that, hey, you're acting as if buying around 800,000 rounds over the next 2 or 3 years for 155 millimeter artillery. You're acting as if this is a huge contribution when it's not even close to half of what Ukraine needs in a single year. I'm just pointing these things out, and I point out what the Pentagon says, and then I show you another article from Western analysts or the Western media contradicting it. I'm just showing you because, like you say, Angela, the truth is actually there. The Western media likes to bury the truth, likes to spin it, but usually it's somewhere in there. Very rarely is it a whole cloth absolute lie. Sometimes it is, but usually when that's the case, when there is someone in the Western media doing that, you can find others in the Western media that have contradicted that, and you can show the contradiction, and we can ask ourselves why is there the contradiction. So and that's what we do, and we like to show the actual evidence. When people are making massive claims about something going on in China, claiming there's genocide going on in China, as a huge accusation. It requires equally significant evidence to prove it. And if they have none at all, you're being lied to, you're being propagandized, and you need to think twice, because how many times do we have to go through this, where the Western media lies to you, gets you whipped up for some war, and you buy into it, and then you realize you were lied to when it's too late. How many times do we have to go through that before we wake up and we break the cycle? Let's see.
Yeah, Brian, it reminds me some of experiences I have here in Hong Kong, talking to people, that actually believe everything that the Western media are saying. I go on a single topic, for example, last time was talking about the debt, what they call the debt trap Sri Lanka, the port that was actually given to lease, as a leasing to China for 100 years, and you have that person that says, well, the debt trap, and they say, oh, Sri Lanka, that's a good example, the port. And I spent 15 minutes to explain everything. And then she said, oh, yeah, it's okay, but there's this other thing. And I'm like, you know what? I do the work. I spend, when there's a single subject like the port in Sri Lanka, I spend at least 1 hour just digging everything. And I do the homework, and I show you're wrong, and you keep on hammering me about all this Western media is completely fake. Why am I even spending the time like this? Why it's just people don't do the homework, just don't dig. They just take as face value, and they know they've been lied. Most of the people, they know they've been lied so many times. Weapon of mass distraction. Distraction. Oh my God, destruction.
Well, it is.
Oh my God.
Also,
Actually, See, the subconscious mind, it say like distraction, because that's a distraction too. I mean, so many lies, and people fall into the trap. And then I like that they say, well, but then, for example, like those people, they believe everything, about the alternative news on Ukraine. It comes to China. No. But China, it's authoritarian states. No, but China, it's not. It's different because it's communist. It's like, well, don't be selective. The collective West lies. Those Western media lie, but really about everything. I mean, everything when it comes to geopolitics. And it lies to their people. It lies. I mean, how many scandals do you want? The COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine, Van der Leyen, there's a big scandal. There's a husband inside, and they've been negotiating the contract through SMS. That's how corrupt it is, that system. I mean, how many examples do we need to give you? The Twitter files, Hunter Biden, the suppression of Trump. I mean, FBI going to Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. I mean, so many. Just how many? But I don't like, like people, they get selective. It's like this but thing. Well, once you start doing but well, no, it's not.
It comes down to emotions. It's not. They're not being and it's a form of being illogical. It's emotions. So they're being logical about certain things. A lot of people that follow me are very logical when it comes to Russia, but only because they were initially receptive to Russia because of some political proclivity that they have, personal political proclivity that they themselves have, that made them receptive to having an open mind about Russia. But again, if their politics, because they feel this necessity to have some sort of ism that they identify as, toward the left or to the right or wherever. And when it comes to China, it conflicts with their ism, and their mind is closed. And not only closed, but actually their mind is actually receptive to the lies, because they don't want to believe that, I don't like communism. China's communist. And so I can't like China because it'll make me a bad anti-communist. So their mind is shut. It's like a steel trap. They cannot accept that. First of all, there's very little that is actually communist about China. Let's be honest. There's a mixture of approaches China uses, including central planning, like whatever communism means, because everyone has a different definition. But if you actually go to China, Angela, you live in China, it's like anywhere else you go. People do business, they own property, they go about their life the same way you do everywhere else. So what is fundamentally different about it, besides like you were talking about, Angela, the profile of the leadership, their qualifications, and the way people work their way up, and how they've dispensed with these ridiculous nonsense elections for national leader that no one, general population is not really qualified to vote on that. Let's be honest. In the West, these people don't know anything. They don't know where their food comes from. They don't know where their electricity comes from. And then they're going to vote for who's going to be president of their country, who's running all of these things that they don't even understand. It doesn't make sense. A democracy, like say a boardroom, and they vote. These are all people who are involved in the company, and they understand the company through and through, so they can make an informed decision. If it was just some guy off the street that was also included in the board for some reason, how could he vote in an informed way? He couldn't. And so we have to be realistic about all of these things. And the more you just follow the facts and follow the truth wherever it brings you, and the less you need to hammer everything in to fit your political ideology, the clearer everything will become. You can still have an ideology to guide you, but an ideology should not be a constraint. It should not be a straitjacket. I think we could probably do a whole episode on
Yeah. I think just maybe a last point. We already at almost 1.5 hours. I think a lot of people, there's someone mentioned the cognitive dissonance. Just like when we talk about projection, the West is so afraid sometimes of China because it thinks that China would do the same that the West did to the rest of the world. And I think they're completely wrong when it comes to that. If there's one country in the world historically that hasn't been hegemonic, has been actually really self-centered, I mind my own business, can we work together, can we trade together, and really focusing on share prosperity internally, but actually externally too. It's not about me getting rich and you getting, and this colonialism, like having boots on the ground controlling you. No, it's about, I have my home, and I have a home for China. It's 1.4 billion people. It's big enough. They have so much to do. They have to maintain unity. China, their job to maintain unity, prosperity, stability. It's been unstable. They had civil wars, millions of people dying. They've been colonized. There was 100 years of humiliation. They've been through so much. What they want is stability, and they want to do business. When you live in China, there's one thing that comes all the time. People are so pragmatic. Actually, 20 years ago, they were very direct. That after asking you where you came from, they were asking you very pragmatic. Direct. How much do you make? How much do you make? They're down to earth because it's tangible. You have a good living and so on. So what they did a long time ago, and you had an episode with Carl Jha, and Carl Jha can tell you more about this, but China never invaded. China had the biggest navy ever. They would go around Southeast Asia, 30,000 army, navy personnel. Now the biggest fleet in the world, in the 16th century, and they would actually have ports where they would actually trade. They had only, but they wouldn't colonize those countries because China, what they wanted to do was just trading. And the China 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago is the same as now. So if China gets to be the largest economy in the world, which by the way it is, in purchasing power parity, China is already has surpassed the US. But China is not going to do the same mistake as the US did, because it was never again like this. And if you look at the US history, there's this sense of mission, divine mission. We are, and it was at the beginning, the colons, it was there was mission, religious mission to spread a religion and values. China is not. And if you look at China, the character China is Zhongguo, means the center, the country of the center. China is self-centered. Chinese care about Chinese only. You might think it's selfish, but it's first, you need to take care of, if you are an individual, Brian, you need to take care of your family first, right? And then if you can do things for other people, that's another thing. But that's how Chinese think. I take care of my home. And that's why, you have such good leaders, because their main focus is how I can bring prosperity. Now, compare the leaders we have in Europe. Macron is a globalist. France is a tool for globalist agenda, but he's not focusing on French first.
Yeah.
This is why when you look at every politician, you need to ask yourself, is he a globalist or is he a patriotic? And it has become a negative word, the patriotic word. But you want to have a president that actually loves his country before the EU or before NATO. Now you have those politicians in the collective West. They're actually just thinking in terms of the globalist agenda. And the globalist agenda is actually working for the big corporation. So destruction of nation states. They don't want any more nation states. They are going to destroy culture. They want to destroy, it's what they call deconstruction. At the level, deconstruction of religion. What Zelensky is rejecting Orthodox Church. And it's a deconstruction of the human being. Why now, they're introducing, this is only the beginning, they're introducing, oh, you don't know if you're a boy or girl. It's, I mean, he's a man, he's pregnant, but it's a man. I mean, things like that. BS
Well,
like that.
look, yeah, it's
a system of deconstruction.
yes, exactly, which is exactly what the British Empire used to do to countries, say 100 or 200 years ago. They would go into a country and they would start deconstructing it. They would divide people against each other, have them fight each other, undermine their indigenous institutions, religion. This is a process that the U.S., through the National Endowment for Democracy and its other organizations, they are doing this right now. Right now, here in Thailand, NED-funded organizations are attacking Thai institutions in favor of Western style and even just Western institutions outside of Thailand. They attack religion. They're infecting education. And it's the exact same process. And like I said, the people who are running the West do not identify as, oh, yeah, I'm an American. This is America. This is my country. Everyone is a potential victim for them. They want everything from everyone. They don't care how any of it turns out. It's like a virus. A virus is infecting the host. It's going to kill the host, but the virus doesn't understand that because it's driven by this blind tropism that forces them to go through this process over and over again until everything is gone. And this has happened all throughout history. The cell empires rise and fall. And I just want to reinforce what you said, Angela, about China. I know you know all of these things, but when people hear it, they're like, well, you're just imagining that China is benevolent and all of this. Do the research, do the analysis, look at China. Do they have institutions like the National Endowment for Democracy to try to impose their system on other countries, to interfere in the internal political affairs of other countries? No, they don't. Analyze their military, and I have done this. Their military is, and even Western analysts admit, China's military is defensive in nature. The way they're drawing up their plans to wage war against China is all based around the fact that, oh, we can do blockades against China way away from China, like block shipping lanes far out of range of China, because they don't even have a navy, a blue water navy that can go around the planet like we can to undo the damage we do with our blue water navy. The truth is hidden in plain sight. Like you said, Angela, they want to do business. Many nations in the world, including China, just want to do business. If you live here in Southeast Asia, or Angela lives in China, you can see it with your own eyes. Just look around. Look at what the U.S. has done or hasn't done, and look at what China is doing for people.
I want to add one more thing. It's just people when people hear me, they tend to think, well, he's pro-China. I'm actually not. To be honest, China's been good to me, but I'm not like pro-China. Ultimately, I'm a foreigner here. I'm Italian. I'm Swiss. That's my country, and I love my country more than I love China. It's counterintuitive. I'm doing this because I love my country. My country is going the wrong direction, and this is going to lead to a confrontation. I do that because I'm afraid that if someone doesn't step up and tell the truth about the reality, and somehow I think I'm legitimate to talk because of living so long in China, well, then we are going to head towards confrontation, and nobody will win there. It's total destruction. I'm talking about in terms of human being, not in terms of being pro-China. I just want the truth to be out there. There's lots of things I don't like about China, because it's not, it's so different from my culture, but I love things that are also different, and I see them, but, I might not understand everything, but ultimately, if we are going the same direction the Western media want us to go, we are going towards confrontation. And I think somehow we are trying, you and I, Brian, we're trying to bridge those misunderstandings. There's a long bridge. You have the West, the East, and somehow we're doing part of that trip. And maybe we have some Asians like Karja is a good example. He's doing part of the bridge too, coming from the Asian perspective. And somehow, if we do that, and if somehow this message is spread, then somehow it's for peaceful coexistence somehow.
Yes, and I want to highly recommend it, and it's not because it's my a video on my channel. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Carl Za, or he introduces himself as Carl Za. It's not. I don't know if it's Carl Za or Ja. I know in Chinese when you
It's
see
Ja,
ZH,
yeah.
it's Ja. Maybe he just got tired of explaining it to people. He's like, yeah, just call me Carl Za. But he did an excellent. I learned so much. I didn't know a lot of what he went over in that. It was a history lecture about the century of humiliation, what China went through because of Western imperialism, Western style imperialism executed by the Japanese. And when you look at that and then you see what's going on today, it's a closed case. They are invested in self-preservation. They're not building an empire. They're reacting to empire. I have to do this. Hold on, I need to find where this. I have to do this because I don't mean to ignore people. I've seen this question like
it's a good
100
book
times in every single. Yeah, maybe you can talk about it. I have not read it. I will not read it, and I will not do a video on it. And the only reason why is because I have no time to read books. I do my approach. And that is all of my time is absorbed doing that. But Angelo, you have read the book. Maybe you can talk about it.
No, I came across actually recently, but this is it's a big reference. Actually, it's how I'm going to simplify. I'm not an expert in this. I want to highlight, because it's a big piece. It's actually how the U.S. actually co-opted Chiang Kai-shek, and actually. With Chiang Kai-shek, they were linked with the Song family, and I'm sure I feel embarrassed because Karl Jack could say much better. But the Song family was Christianized, and somehow through Chiang Kai-shek and the Song family, which actually had huge power in Taiwan within the Kuomintang, they wanted to Christianize China. They wanted to make China in their own image, the same as God made man to its own image. They wanted to apply that to China, which has 5,000 years of history. It's just absurd. But that the China mirage was basically they had too much expectation for China. They really thought that China would change and they would become westernized, and it didn't happen. Actually, what China did, they were extremely smart. Deng Xiaoping in 1979, he did a opening up at the reform of China. And all along, what China did was to pretend that it would side with the West. It didn't. China even sided with the West against the USSR, but it was not. It was very strategic. It didn't side against completely the USSR. It didn't. It was pretending. It's what we call realpolitik. It was pretending to side completely with the US, and somehow it would slowly liberalize and so on. But you know what? They did try to do that. They opened up the door. What happened? 1989, one of the first color revolution, Beijing. They wanted to go all the way and destroy. Since then, they learned their lesson, and they were not going to fall into the trap. They've been protecting their sovereignty for a long time, all along, since 1989. They learned their lesson, and they say, you know what? We need to protect everything. So those NGOs won't be able to come in. But we are going to leave some flexibility because China needed two things: investment, they needed money, and they needed transfer of technology. So they said, you know what? We have cheap labor, we work hard, transfer your industries. And to the extent that the West, they deindustrialized completely for China, but somehow China didn't give up its sovereignty. It didn't become like Western style fake democracy. Somehow Chinese, they were like, yes, we'll become that, we'll do reform, but somehow, they were buying time, and somehow they had this long-term plan, and the collective West has been distracted. The Middle East, how much they spend there, and I think China. I think this is when there's this big question that of trust, and falling to the trap. The question it arises especially when it comes to Ukraine these days. I don't know if you saw that. The last week, Merkel, she admitted that the Minsk agreement, Minsk II, was to buy time. That basically the purpose was, let's sign an agreement. We're not going to respect it, and we are going to build up this army, the Ukrainian army, and somehow Ukraine is going to be a ramp to fight Russia. But you see, the question, there is a big question mark, is that, did Putin trust too much the West? I think for a long time, especially at the beginning when he was elected, he wanted really to be part of the Europe. He wanted to enter into NATO. He did trust the West, but up to a certain point, then you need to realize that the ultimate goal is to destroy Russia, to Balkanize Russia. The plan is clear. I don't know if Putin knew that since the beginning when he was elected. I don't know. But 2014. That's the big question. I mean, do you think, for example, a question I'm going to throw to you? Do you think he should have gone, knowing what we know today? Did he have the capacity to go all the way in 2014? Should he have gone all the way and destroy this Ukrainian army? Before it got strong, because now, I mean, in 2022, before the special military operation, it got really, really strong. Do you think it should have gone all the way, in 2014?
I think Russia was also trying to buy time, and I'm pretty sure they were, the type of preparations that they made for the special military operation, what we see unfolding right now, that took full commitment to at that time, the possibility that this was going to end in armed conflict. So they were very confident that the West was going to betray them and that this military conflict would be necessary, to the extent where they are prepared and stockpiled weapons and have prepared their military, not just to go and do the special military operation, but to check other conflicts that the West was going to try and has since tried to trigger elsewhere along Russia's periphery, and also maintain a reserve that they can use in case NATO itself gets directly involved. So they prepared for the worst. Maybe they hoped for the best, but I don't even think so. I think they prepared for the worst. They expected the worst. And the only thing that can happen now is that it's not as bad as they imagined, and it might make things, easier, so to speak, as they go along. And I think China did very much the same thing. They were not ready. Think about China in the 1990s, or during the handover, when they were making this deal with the British about, all of the conditions that the British were going to give back territory they stole by force from China. Oh yeah, you have to. We're going to give it back to you, but you have to follow all of these conditions. I like to compare it to a thief breaks into your house, refuses to leave, makes you sign, some paper saying that if he wants to come back on Sunday and watch football, you have to let him in. And then as soon as he's out the door, you lock the door and you're never going to let him back in again. Of course, you're going to rip up the paper and throw it away. And so this is what these nations all around the world have been dealing with for generations, up to and including present day. It's the exact same mentality in the West. It's just it's more transparent. They cannot paper over it with, we're promoting civilization or spreading freedom around the world. Another thing is the Tiananmen Square incident, and I call it an incident because if you look into what actually happened, these mobs backed by the U.S., they were killing soldiers and police. It was not one-sided violence by the military. It was the protesters torching buses with soldiers inside, stealing their weapons. And if you look into the details, and Angelo and we've covered this in the past, you will realize that it was an incident. It was not if it was a massacre, it was the mobs massacring people. That was an attempt, because that's why the West was investing in China. They honestly thought at one point they could flip the government and have cheap labor indefinitely in China. They could essentially recolonize it in a modern sense. That's what they were trying to do, and they failed. And yet they had this huge investment in China that was very difficult to undo. And this is what empire always does. They paint themselves in the corners, and then the empire crumbles. And that's what we're watching right now. And we're just trying to wake up as many people as possible to what's going on, so they could avoid contributing to the needless dragging on of this process. We want there to be a transition that is as peaceful and as brief as possible. The U.S. is the current people running the U.S. right now. They're going to be gone. Someone else is going to take over. I want to see that transition happen quickly and as painlessly as possible for Americans, because America has a lot of potential, and it could be a very constructive partner in a multipolar world. I truly believe that. That's why we do this every day, and we do this live stream every week. I think we're going to end it, because if not, we're going to go on forever. I want to thank you, Angelo, and everyone who's tuned in live. Thank you for joining me on this Friday evening. This is, so many other things you could be doing on a Friday. I'm flattered that you wanted to spend it listening.
It's a therapy, Brian. It's a therapy. I think we do that out of frustration. The thing is, it's a good valve. Just
talk it out.
It's great. It's great. I wanted to say also thank you to people. Really, I think somehow it's it's great. It's great satisfaction just to see that people are following, supporting. So
Yes.
if you can keep on. Share the work of Brian. Because Brian does a lot of. It's a lot of effort. I know how much research you do. So really. So if people can follow and share the work of New Atlas.
Yes, thank you. Everywhere, and you can look in the video description below, find where you can find and follow Angelo's work. You're on Twitter, you're on YouTube. There might be something else there in the list. And if there's anything else, Angelo, you ever want to add, just let me know. There's also ways you can find and follow my work in the video description below, as well as ways you can help support New Atlas, because I don't monetize YouTube, not at all. And if an ad ever pops up, just skip it, because it's not doing me any good. And also PayPal, I'm done with PayPal. PayPal in Thailand makes it almost impossible to use now. So it's done. And plus they were deplatforming people for their political views, which is nonsense. So good riddance with PayPal. So thank you again. And until next week, bye for now.